Shall we have a day out? Just you and me having a little wander around somewhere interesting. Hello and welcome to Through Lucy's Lens. My name is Lucy and I'm a social historian, and I love to explore the lives of how real people lived in the past. And today we've come to Greenfield Valley Heritage Park, just outside Holywell in North Wales, and it really is a hidden gem. It's one of those places that I suspect you could quite easily pass by without ever realising quite how much is here. Because scattered through this rather lovely valley are the remains of mills and factories, old farm buildings, workers' homes, and houses which have been dismantled elsewhere and carefully rebuilt here. So today I thought we'd forget about the world for 15 minutes or so and simply have a look around. Greenfield Valley stretches for around 70 acres between Holywell and the ruins of Basingwerk Abbey. And although today it's remarkably peaceful, this was once a landscape of work. The museum itself came much later. It grew around Abbey Farm, which remained a working farm until 1979, and the museum opened in the early 1980s. Buildings which were disappearing elsewhere in Flintshire began to be rescued too. They were surveyed, dismantled and reconstructed here. I think it's time we went inside one of the houses. This is Pentre Farmhouse, and this is one of the buildings that I really wanted to see here. It originally stood at Lixwm, elsewhere in Flintshire, and by the late 1950s it had been abandoned. Eventually, new farm buildings threatened the site, and there was little realistic prospect of saving the house where it stood, so it was dismantled brick by brick and brought here. But when experts began to study it, they discovered something fascinating. This wasn't a house from just one moment in history. They identified around 8 different phases of alteration, with parts of the building dating back to the early 16th century. Generation after generation had changed it, extended it, improved it, and adapted it to whatever their family happened to need. And I think that's one of the things I really love about going around these houses. We have a tendency to imagine them frozen in time. But the people who lived here didn't think they were living in a historical building. It was just home. When Pentre was reconstructed here at Greenfield Valley, the decision was made to return it roughly to the appearance it may have had around 1660. This is a farmhouse, a working place. For much of the 17th century, the main room of a farmhouse like this was the centre of family life. Cooking, eating, working and sitting together all happened around the same fire. And the fire really was the heart of the house. Keeping a household warm meant gathering or buying fuel, carrying it inside, lighting the fire and keeping it alight for as long as possible. And while you're doing that, you still need to cook your dinner, fetch the water, wash clothes, repair clothes, animals to tend, some of whom during the colder months might even be living under the same roof. You would have had food to preserve, candles to make or buy. And what, as always, I love about this house is this isn't presenting the life of somebody extraordinary. It's a farmhouse. The people living here had land, animals and possessions. But comfort still depended on an enormous amount of work. And everything inside the house had a purpose. A wooden chest, for example, wasn't merely decorative. It was storage for precious things, linens, grains, sometimes even locked to stop employed farmhands dipping in. A stool, handmade, could be moved to wherever another pair of hands was needed. Textiles were valuable enough to be repaired and reused. And a good bed would be one of the most expensive possessions in the house. The furnishings you see today were chosen to represent the period the house has been reconstructed to. And when Pentre was first completed here in the 1980s, the Welsh Folk Museum at St Fagans even loaned contemporary furniture to help bring it back to life. And you know I love St Fagans, so it was only natural I found this house so endearing. Also endearing is that the stones, the walls of this house, once looked out onto a completely different patch of Flintshire. People walked through this doorway and they would never have imagined that centuries later people like me would be wandering around their kitchen discussing their furniture. And I often think, is someone looking down and thinking how marvellous or how ridiculous is that? Although I really hope that they'd be pleased we saved it. We now enter a recreation of a cottage at Battery Row. Built around 1800 to house local employees working in a nearby copper and brass industrial works. Battery Row consisted of multi-storey cottage structures right next to the battery pond and factory water wheels. The residential buildings fell into disuse and were completely demolished by the 1960s. Homes like these placed working families right beside the industries which employed them. The factory wasn't somewhere distant, it shaped the landscape around you. The sound of it and the smell of it was around you 24/7. Your household depended on it to provide a wage. And it's very easy to describe the Industrial Revolution in terms of inventions and production figures. But for most people, I always remember it wasn't a historical event. It was a Monday morning. And if you like interiors of homes like this, you might like to check out my video on Stack Square workers' cottages. And now seems a perfect time to thank the subscriber who emailed in to ask me to offer a verbal cue for quiet time as well as words on the screen. Here we go. Have a lovely look around. What are you doing? You're chomping. And already we've come to our final house. This is Cwm Llydan, a 19th century Welsh farmhouse. And this house is set in the Victorian period. Like Pentre, this house didn't originally stand here. It was moved from elsewhere and reconstructed as part of the museum. And I think it's really interesting at this museum that you can visit Pentre, which is set in the Tudor period, Tudor and Stuart period, and then you can come across to Cwm Llydan, which is set in the Victorian period. Because although the centuries separate the worlds they're representing, there are small little threads of familiarity that we can see running between them. The fireplace is still important. The kitchen is still a place of work. Furniture still has to earn the space it occupies. But then other things are starting to look more familiar. By the Victorian period, even fairly modest homes could contain an increasing number of manufactured household goods. Pottery, textiles, printed materials and mass-produced utensils became increasingly available to everyone. Objects which would have once been expensive or have had to have been handmade could gradually find their way into ordinary homes. And yet life on a 19th century farm remained relentlessly physical. Before piped water, electricity, washing machines, fridges, or of course supermarkets, keeping a household running required an extraordinary amount of labour. Collecting water, collecting fuel, it goes on. And then you've got to get up the next day and do it all again tomorrow. I often think the greatest trick these old farmhouses play on us is that it looks cosy, because they are cosy. I would move in here in my imagination immediately. But we're visiting on a nice day and I don't have to fetch the water. I haven't spent the morning cleaning out the animals. Nobody is sitting waiting for me to produce dinner from whatever happens to be on the table. And when it gets dark, I can go home tonight and just turn the lights on. Still, I understand the appeal, because there's something comforting about a room where everything seems to have a purpose. A table that's been scrubbed rather than styled, a cosy chair beside the fire. The sort of room where you can almost imagine somebody coming through the door. And perhaps that's what I wanted from today's visit. Nothing dramatic, just ordinary lives, ordinary homes, and the little things that people left behind. And I think although this is a small space, a small museum, it is definitely worth a visit. A real little hidden gem if you're spending the day in North Wales. And again, I'm now going to give you some quiet time to explore the upstairs of this lovely house. One of the nice things about this museum is they do not give you any information really about who could have potentially lived at this house. So that just gives you space in your imagination to drift around, think about who was here before you, and even how you'd like to live in it now. And I think we've earned a cup of tea. And because we're in Wales, of course, a Welsh cake, which I had at the cafe just outside the museum. And it was absolutely lovely. But before we leave, there's one last place I want to show you, because tucked at the bottom of the valley are the ruins of Basingwerk Abbey. It was founded in 1131 and later became a Cistercian monastery, part of that great network of religious houses which once spread across medieval Wales. Don't worry, I'm not going to turn this into an abbey tour. For today, it was just enough to wander through the ruins and imagine the place when these were rooms rather than walls open to the sky. And there's actually a neat connection here with everything we've just seen, because in the centuries afterwards, the stones from this abbey were taken away and reused in buildings and mills around the Greenfield Valley. And I think this is a really lovely place to finish today's video. It's been a little while since we last did this together, and I'm sorry about that. And I've really missed it. So thank you for spending a little bit of your day with me today. I hope wherever you are, things feel just a tiny bit quieter than they did 15 minutes ago. And I'll see you again very soon. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and joining our lovely community of history lovers. It's free and I'm always so grateful for your company. And there is, I promise, lots more to come. So until the next one, goodbye.